You know, Beyonce said it best. I can feel your halo. I can feel your halo. What's cracking, everyone? My name is Ryan, and today we're going to be taking a look at the Schiit Midgard. Now, this is a HALO headphone amp from Schiit Audio. It retails in at $219. And before I get into this video, I do want to send a big thank you to Schiit Audio, who did send this out in exchange for my review. All thoughts, all opinions, and all quotes are of my own. Well, except for the quotes. Those are others that I quote during the video. So what in the world is a HALO amp? Well, this is Schiit's own newly developed topology that is called the HALO Topology, that basically is a mixed feedback mode that will incorporate the driver of the headphone or of the IEM that you plug into the XLR output in order to incorporate that into your sound. Now, it's supposed to deliver a much more controlled sound, which we will talk about that when we get into the sound section. But first, I do want to start with just the skeleton of the Midgard to tell you, the build quality that you're going to get when you buy this shit. By the way, I almost forgot. One thing that Schiit will tell you about the Midgard is that if you want to measure this amplifier, they will gladly send it to you so that you can do so. And I just so happen to measure this amplifier, and let me tell you, it's not what they were talking about. So let's go ahead and move on. All right, and so let's take a look at the skeleton of the Midgard first. And the first thing you're going to notice is this is some solid built shit, as usual. It is all metal. It is black. It's kind of a brushed metal at that. It's got these vent holes at the top because this will get a little bit hot. You see the nice Schiit logo on here. And then taking a look at the back, what we are going to notice here on the back of the amplifier, of course, you have the DC plug-in for the big wall wart that you're going to plug into your wall. You're also going to notice the on-off switch, and then you're going to see some pre-outs. Now, there are both balanced and RCA pre-outs so that this headphone amplifier can be plugged into, some speaker monitors or speaker amplifier, or even be a preamp to another amplifier, whether you want to go single-ended or balanced out. And then the inputs are both RCA and balanced inputs as well. Now, one thing I think that's important to note on this is not a balanced amplifier. So what that means, if you plug in your balanced inputs from your balanced DAC, it's going to convert that to single-ended on the output, and vice versa. If you go in single-ended on the inputs, it's going to convert balanced on the output. It's very unique, something different that Schiit has done here, but it makes it so that no matter which output that you use in the front, you're going to get the same wattage, which is about 5 watts into 32 ohms. Now, going into the front of the amplifier, you're going to notice that you are going to see a couple of buttons here along with the volume dial. Now, the buttons here first is going to be your selector between either XLR or RCA, or single-ended, I should say. And then you're also going to have your gain button. Now, pushed out or depressed is going to be your high gain. Pushed in is low gain. Low gain I have found to be 0 dB of boost. And then high gain is going to be 14 decibels of a boosting. So it does a nice job of boosting your volume, which is important as we talk about sound here pretty soon. And then the volume dial, as I said, the volume dial turns very smooth. I love the volume pot on this headphone. Really nice black knob. Nicely done there, Schiit. The one thing about the technology of this amplifier is this is a discrete amplifier. Now, this does replace the Magnius. In fact, Schiit has retired the Magnius. So if you're somebody that owns a Magnius and are wondering if this is an upgrade, I'm not going to tell you that. I'm just going to tell you watch this video and decide for yourself, because there are definitely some differences, starting with the fact this is discrete and the Magnius used op amps. What does that mean? Discrete is typically a lower noise floor. In fact, in my testing with either IEMs or sensitive headphones, I did not have noise issues at all out of either the single-ended or the balanced output, and that was excellent, I got to tell you, for my listening. Now, with that being said, I do want to kind of set this up before I talk about sound and let you know that I did do my testing with my Bifrost 264 that I just got. I get it, it's a pretty pricey DAC to be using with an amp like this, And the Bifrost 264 does come in a little bit hot out of the balance because it's 4 volts, whereas some balanced DACs might be 2 volts. You know, that's kind of double the volts. So you are going to get higher volume when you're plugging in a balanced DAC that has a little bit more voltage coming out of it. So do note that. That doesn't mean, again, that this is a balanced amplifier. Now, this pairs really well with the Modius. If you're somebody that has the Modius, do take note of that. Really, in my opinion, the Bifrost 264 is just a different type of synergy that you're going to get with this amplifier. So with all that being set up, guys, now I think it's time to talk about the halo of the Midgard. All right, so what I did when I tested the sound of this amplifier, I used my different dynamic headphones that I have, my different planar headphones that I had, and some IMs that I had. And I tried them both on single-ended and the XLR so I could give you an impression of either one. And then I even went further and compared this amplifier to my Cayin HA-6. Why? Well, that is the other solid-state amplifier that I had. And I wanted to see, you know, how an amplifier about twice the price of this one, almost 3 times the price of this one, compares. Now, to start this out, I listened to my Focal Radiance. Now, that is a closed-back dynamic driver headphone, very efficient, easy to drive, and I tried it out on both the single-ended and the XLR outputs here so that I could test the HALO topology and see if I could notice a difference. And what I noticed in the differences was that the Radiance is already a bassy headphone and sometimes gets a little bit boomy, in fact. And on the single-ended, I got some of that boominess and some of that, you know, typical performance I have gotten out of the Radiance. What I will tell you, when I went balanced out, though, it just controlled the Radiance a little bit better. And I'm talking subtle differences, but well controlled in that I didn't get quite as much boominess. The bass seemed a little bit tighter. The mid-range seemed a little cleaned up in a way. And then now the Radiance does have some upper mid-range harshness. Now that didn't go away, but I will tell you that some of that brightness and things that can come out of headphones, it seemed to be a little bit on the warm side. All right, so then I went further and I tested out my Hifiman Arya Organic. Now that is the easiest to drive Arya that there is yet to date. This paired excellent with that headphone. Reason why, again, was the control. It just made the bass tight, made the mid-range, the lower mid-range especially, just nice and tight. It still maintained the dynamics of it, but what I really liked was it ever so slightly tamed that upper treble a little bit and didn't make it quite as sizzly on some tracks as, you know, the single-ended version of this does and as the Organic can be. Now, don't get me wrong. It can still be a bright headphone if you are sensitive to that, which I sometimes am. So I'm not trying to tell you that it didn't make it bright, but I found it to pair really, really well with the Arya Organic. And I would dare say even more so than the Cayin HA-6 that I have, that I also tested this out against. It was just an excellent controlled sound out of the HALO mixed feedback. Now, I also tried out my ZMF Atrium Closed and my ZMF Auteur Classic. Now, this was interesting. The Auteur Classic, again, not to repeat myself, very controlled, mid-centric, very nice sound, especially out of the balanced mixed feedback. But the Atrium Closed, I actually didn't care for that. I don't think the synergy was quite there. The mids sounded even more recessed than I remember, and I even tried, you know, boosting it with high gain, and I just did not care for that sound at all. Again, synergies matter, guys, and the synergy of that just did not work for me with the Atrium Closed. I also have the Hifiman HE1000 V2 and V3, future video. And I will tell you that both of those headphones sounded very good on this amplifier out of the HALO. Out of the single-ended, a little bit more on the sloppy side, I would say, and a little bit too blended for headphones that I think can sound pretty darn precise. But when I use that HALO topology, again, it just had that nice controlled sound. Now, one thing I will tell you with all the headphones, pretty much all the headphones, was I did use the high gain mode. And that kind of surprised me because 5 watts you would think would be plenty. But what I found was giving it high gain just gave me a little more volume play. When I was going out of single-ended, I was almost always 70 to 80% on the volume dial with most of my headphones. Now, something like the Radiance, I was not. But I mean, on my other headphones, even the Arya Organic, I got pretty high, and using high gain worked fine. I didn't feel like it did anything wrong to the dynamics. I tested it, back with low gain just to make sure on that, and I thought it was perfectly fine, but I do think that's interesting to note that I needed to use the high gain. Now, if I was going out of the balanced inputs in the back from my Bifrost 264, that's a little bit different of a story because there's so much more power that it dishes out into this amplifier. I still find myself using the high gain though, and I think that's something that anybody that gets this amplifier will probably end up doing with some of your harder to drive headphones, and there's nothing wrong with doing that. Now, IEMs, I'm not going to list all the IEMs, but I have several in the budget to mid-range, and I will tell you all of them had an excellent noise floor, but also had a very good pairing with this amp, and using single-ended typically was perfectly fine for my IEMs and gave me a nice, sound example, but then going into that HALO topology, just controlled the sound. And that is my best way that I know how to describe what that does. It controls the headphone, it controls the IM, it controls the driver that you're plugging into it. I mean, it's some serious voodoo type stuff that Schiit has put into this amplifier. And I gotta tell you, for $220, I'm impressed. So is the HALO topology a gimmick? Or does it actually work? Well, my ears tell me this thing works, guys. Coming from something like a Magnius to a headphone amplifier like this for the same price, do I consider it an upgrade? It depends if you want to go op amp into a discrete. It depends if you have things like IEMs you want to plug in or Auteur sensitive headphones you want to plug in. But yes, the HALO topology mixed feedback, it all works and comes together really well. Is the single-ended of this amplifier crap? No, it's very good. There's a lot of power on tap for either or between the single-ended or the XLR balanced out. If you're coming from something like a Magni, it's absolutely an upgrade because you're going to be able to go balanced out and try, different power options and things with your headphones. You get pre-outs from this. I can go on and on, but I do think Schiit has an absolute winner in this amplifier. It's been one of my favorite things I have heard this year, especially when I consider the price, because I have to consider the price with something like this, knowing that this is just $220. For example, my Cayin HA-6 that I also love, it's about $600, guys. And do I think it sounds about 3 times as good as this? No, I don't. There's other options. There's more power. There's some impedance things I can do with that. But I still think this amplifier sounds excellent. In fact, a lot of the gear I paired up to this sounded very similar to my IHA6. And by the way, that's a discrete amplifier too. So there you go. All right, guys, hopefully you enjoyed this video. If so, please smash that like button. And if you haven't done so already, please subscribe to the channel because, well, I might have, more songs to quote or something in the future or something like that. I got more stuff coming out as usual, guys. Have a safe and happy holiday. I thank you all for watching, and I will see you in the next one.